Today's topic is a very famous criticism, that is a vindication of the rights of women. It is written by Mary Wollstonecraft, and chapter 2 is our topic, that prevailing opinion of a sexual character discussed. Now, what you are going to get in this video, step by step you will learn the context of this famous piece of writing, the influence of philosophers upon Mary Wollstonecraft, the writer, very short preview of chapter 1, because without knowing chapter 1 we can suddenly jump into the chapter 2, detailed analysis of the whole chapter 2, and for the convenience I have given the paragraph numbers. That means from which paragraph I am going to give you the explanation. You will get one by one throughout the video, and the topics made from paragraphs and analyzed. So the paragraph numbers, by the paragraph numbers you will get to know that these are the paragraphs analyzed, and I will try to analyze all those paragraphs step by step. Lastly, necessary resources for further analysis, for your further study. Now, without delay, let us go into the context first. This book was published in 1792, a time when French Revolution was still in progress and America was experimenting with setting up a democratic republic, a new constitution and a Bill of Rights. So it was a kind of turmoil then. The French Revolution and its effect. So Mary Wollstonecraft viewed the French Revolution as a positive step, an opportunity for the common people of France to claim control of their nation. After its initial publication, Wollstonecraft met Charles Marie de Talleyrand-Périgord, a French diplomat who was known to have some rather limited views on women's education. She dedicated the second edition of A Vindication of the Rights of Women to him, in the hope it might inspire him to provide a better education for women in the new France. Late 18th century England and women. In England, in the late 18th and early 19th centuries, women had no legal rights. A girl was property of her father until she married, at which point she became the property of her husband. Careers were not an option for women of good families, while women in poorer families often needed to work to contribute to the household. The work was often unhealthy and occurred in illegal circumstances. So it was also evident from the context, by contextual ideas, that it was for her a really good time to publish such a text called A Vindication of the Rights of Women. The Enlightenment and Wollstonecraft's thoughts. Wollstonecraft was writing near the end of the Enlightenment, which was a period of history that celebrated the rise of rational and science-based thinking. Newton was an important contributor. This period saw the rise of political theories and celebrated democracy and the common man. So it was also evident from the writing of Mary Wollstonecraft, and particularly in this chapter 2, that the effect and influence of the Enlightenment is very clear upon her. Her thoughts and expressions were coming out because of the Enlightenment. As I promised you to explain that the influence of the philosophers upon Mary Wollstonecraft, there are two specific philosophers called Rousseau and Locke who had a lot of influence upon her. First of all, say Rousseau, she reserves strong words for French philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Rousseau was a controversial and highly influential philosopher of the Enlightenment. Rousseau wrote about the potential for humans to live in primitive state of nature, where human altruism and goodness could thrive. Wollstonecraft seems to believe he was advocating an actual return to the primitive state, something most scholars agree he did not support. Again, Wollstonecraft believed Rousseau's views on the education of women are sexist. He wrote a book called Emily. That means Rousseau wrote a book called Emily in 1762, in which he describes his view of the appropriate education for a young man named Emily and the young woman, Sophie, he will marry. Although Emily's education is appropriately rigorous for a young man in this ideal society, Rousseau's prescription for Sophie is she could learn how to please her man. Rousseau argues women prefer playing with dolls and learning to sew. To those areas should be the focus of their education rather than abstract, complex topics. Wollstonecraft intensely disagrees with Rousseau's stance on women's role in the ideal society. And this is very evident in the chapter 2, where she directly criticizes Rousseau's concepts which were published at that time in Emily. Locke's ideas, on the other hand, had a bitter effect upon her. English philosopher John Locke, had a huge influence on Wollstonecraft, though he wrote almost 100 years before the publication of Vindication of the Rights of Women. Locke argued that human beings had certain natural rights that humans aren't simply by existing. Locke's ideas on education also influenced her. He believed the mind is a blank state of birth, a tabula rasa. A proper education can fill the brain with the best ideas to produce a productive moral community of individuals. Wollstonecraft does not superficially mention the tabula rasa, but her ideas follow a similar pattern. A woman's mind is a blank slate, and if you do not educate her, you cannot expect her to produce worthwhile, complex ideas. See, this also reminds us of Anne Bradstreet's The Prologue. Some similar kind of thoughts were also revealed by the poetess. Next is chapter 1's summary. It's a very basic idea. Rights and involved duties of mankind considered. And in this idea, what is about the chapter 1? She identifies reason, virtue and knowledge as the elements that distinguish the individual. Wollstonecraft has strong disagreements with Rousseau. She claims his arguments in favor of a state of nature are plausible but unsound. The real problem with society, she argues, is the arbitrary and regal power. In other words, the monarchy and aristocratic power. She also criticizes professions in which great subordination of rank constitutes its power, calling them highly injurious to morality. As example, she cites a standing army, sailors and naval gentlemen, even the clergy and the rules of fashion for gentlemen. These examples are also available in chapter 2, like where in chapter 1, she regulates the ideas with clergymen, injurious to morality, supporting statements, naval gentlemen, etc. On the other hand, in chapter 2, she compares women's rights and education with military men. So there are references throughout the text, throughout the vindications of rights of women. Because our focus is chapter 2, we are going to understand only chapter 2 very thoroughly. Lastly, Wollstonecraft in this chapter, means in chapter 1, directly attacks the controversial and highly influential philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau, which she does also in chapter 2. Rousseau had arguments with organized religion, which may be why Wollstonecraft refers him to against God. So it was not about education properly, rather females' education. It was rather about the organized religion. She more talks about organized religion and Rousseau's concepts about it, and she criticizes Rousseau. In chapter 2, she also criticizes Rousseau, but on a different perspective, on a different ground. Now let us move on to chapter 2, that the prevailing opinion of a sexual character discussed. In chapter 2, what I have done here, I have taken certain topics, and based on those topics, I have explained by mentioning the chapter numbers, like what men did, and this you will find in paragraph 1 to 4. Throughout the numbers of the paragraphs, you can understand that these are the factors through these paragraphs she wants to suggest. Moreover, and interestingly, I have composed the text by numbering. That means by giving the numbers so that you can relate the text, which I will definitely give you in the comment section or in the description section. The whole PDF I will be uploading for you in order to understand better. So this is the way I try to figure out what is basically the chapter 2 about. So moving on to the next session, that what men did. The tyranny of men is that women are not allowed to have sufficient strength of mind to acquire what really deserves the name of virtue. Men complain of the follies and caprices of the female sex. Women are told from their infancy and taught by the example of their mothers that little knowledge of human weakness, justly termed cunning, softness of temper, outward obedience, and a scrupulous attention to a puerile kind of propriety will obtain for them the protection of man. And should they be beautiful, everything else is needless for at least 20 years of their lives. Naturally, here the object is the beauty of the female. So this is the tyranny of men, that men throughout the ages cage female in different ways by applying different methods, and in that way male try to conceptualize women in unnatural terms. So where beauty suggests that a female has to possess the beauty in that way, that they should be beautiful and everything else is needless. Milton describes the first frail mother, that means Eve. Women were beings only designed by sweet attractive grace and a docile blind obedience to gratify the senses of man when he can no longer soar on the wing of contemplation. So gratification of man is the only idea that a female should possess. Grossly insulted women of a time may indeed appear as a very unphilosophical manner when they try to secure the good conduct of women by attempting to keep them always the state of childhood. What does it mean? That the insult doesn't limit itself into the idea that the female only, the whole task of a female is to satisfy the male. From this idea, that men appear as a very unphilosophical manner. They try to secure the good conduct of women by attempting to keep always in a state of childhood, that the women are like child, are not mature. And even in our society, we find this. Rousseau was more consistent when he wished to stop the progress of reason in both sexes. For if men eat of the tree of knowledge, women will come in for a test. But from the imperfect cultivation which their understandings now receive, they only attain knowledge of evil. So Rousseau's idea was also different, because Rousseau tried to point out that the progress must not be even in male, not even in female. Even if it in male, it should not definitely be in female. So if men eat the tree of knowledge, women will come in for a test. So it was evident, it was natural for women that they should go to the male's ways. Whatever the male will show to them, they will follow blindly. So in paragraph 1 to 4, you can get these ideas, what men did. On the next, paragraph 5 to 7, Milton and Wollstonecraft. So in this way, I have turned, or I have mentioned the names of the paragraphs, and I have given a certain topic to those paragraphs. That in these paragraphs, that means paragraph 5 to 7, you can get the idea that Milton and Wollstonecraft and the following topics. So Milton focuses to the indefeasible right of beauty. Therefore, she contrasts two passages from Milton's two separate segments. So bringing Milton also makes Wollstonecraft's ideas of grandeur, that she also studied a lot to make her point of view clear. Naturally, when she brings Milton here, Milton's Paradise Lost was one of the greatest epic so far we have understood, and the examples from Paradise Lost is a good one, because she brings two passages to contrast his ideas. To Wollstonecraft uses this idea to point out her idea to express. Now, to whom thus Eve with perfect beauty adorned, my author and disposer, what thou bidst, unargued I obey, so God ordains, God is thy law, thou mine to know no more. And is woman's happiest knowledge and her praise. Now, Eve here describes and accepts her subservient position to Adam before their fall from grace. What extra, if you notice, the extra mark is that in the original text, you will not get the line numbers or the book number. So I have given it here, book 4, line number 635 to 638. And I have also given the explanations of the lines, and naturally, the explanation why Wollstonecraft remarked or cited these aspects, these lines, I am going to explain. So Adam, subservient position to Adam before their fall from grace. Eve understands that Adam has a direct connection to God, which she does not have. In God's scheme, Adam receives God's instructions and passes them on to Eve. Through embracing her position as inferior to Adam's in the chain of compound, Eve experiences contentment and earns the appreciation of God and Adam. Here in the following lines, Milton seems to coincide with me when he makes Adam thus expostulate with his maker. Expostulate means trying to argue. Hast thou not made her here thy substitute, and these inferior far beneath me said? Among unequals what society, etc. You can read the lines from here. But it means that Adam comments that these creatures are also inferior to me, that we can't really communicate. We wouldn't be able to really socialize and exchange ideas and thoughts with each other. It's going to be a little boring. Here, you can find that Milton's idea is completely the right of beauty, the right of association, that Eve is here, is associated with Adam, and she holds the idea that Adam is supposed to be the best. Wollstonecraft very cleverly picks those lines only which shows is her purpose to figure out what the reality of women in the society were. The existence of the female was nearly on the verge of destruction. Naturally, Milton's lines also point out only those ideas of Wollstonecraft that she wants to carry forward. Now, in treating therefore the manners of women, let us disregarding sensual arguments, trace what we should endeavor to make them in order to cooperate, if the expression be not too bold, with the Supreme Being. We only should endeavor to make them in order to cooperate. So female are here only to cooperate. Cooperate with whom? Cooperate with male, cooperate with husband, cooperate with the members who are male in a family. So female is only there to do such kind of activities. Next to the paragraph number 8 to 10, see here innocence is equal to weakness according to Wollstonecraft. Children, I grant, should be innocent, but when the epithet is applied to men or women, it is but a civil term for weakness. For if it be allowed that women were destined by providence to acquire human virtues, and by the exercise of their understandings, that stability of character which is the firmest ground to rest our future hopes upon, they must be permitted to turn to the fountain of light, and not forced to shape their course by the twinkling of a mere satellite. So this innocence is equal to children and is equal to women. So if women is equal to children is equal to innocence, this is a term, substitute term for weakness, that women were destined by providence to acquire human virtues. It is not that somewhere there is a satellite which is twinkling, and because of that the female due to that twinkling of the satellite will hold the power or something else. It is not like that. They are the fountain of light. They are supposed to be innocent, but all those happen because someone else is doing it. Something is happening, and because of that something, women are getting their degree and etc. It's not like that. Individual or private education. So by individual education, I mean for the sense of the world is not precisely defined, such an attention to a child as will slowly sharpen the senses from the temper, regulate the passions, as they begin to ferment, and set the understanding to work before the body arrives at maturity, so that the man may only have to proceed, not to begin, the important task of learning to think and reason. So here individual education suggests that an attention to a child that will slowly sharpen the senses from the temper, and it will regulate the passions also as they begin to ferment, and set the understanding to work before the body arrives at maturity. So this is the basic idea of individual attention. So man may only have to proceed the important task of learning to think and reason. It is not the female, it is not the woman who will think, who will intellectually prosper or progress. It is not that. So this is only male. Men and women must be educated in a great degree by the opinions and manners of the society they live in. These are the words by Mary Wollstonecraft, and these are the views that she wishes to point out, figure out, that men and women must be educated in a great degree. Now, what is then called perfect education? The most perfect education, in my opinion, is such an exercise of the understanding as is best calculated to strengthen the body and form the heart, or in other words, to enable the individual to attain such habits of virtue as will render it independent. So it is the perfect education. So it will enable the individual means anybody, to attain such habits of virtue as will render it independent. So it will teach you the independence. It will teach you your heart to be formulated, strengthening mind and body. So this is called a perfect education. Now in paragraph 10 and 11, you will get the women's struggle to be virtuous. So it is the first to call any being virtuous whose virtues do not result from the exercise of its own reason. This was Rousseau's opinion respecting men. I extend it to women, and confidently assert that they have been drawn out of their sphere by false refinement, not by an endeavor to acquire masculine qualities. Still, the regal homage which they receive is so intoxicating that till the manners of the times are changed and formed on more reasonable principles, it may be impossible to convince them that the illegitimate power which they obtain by degrading themselves is a curse, and that they must return to nature in equality if they wish to secure the placid satisfaction and unsophisticated affections impart. What is significant here? First of all, try to read the red lines, because I have mentioned those red lines. Rather, I marked those lines as in italics and in red lines. All the lines are by Mary Wollstonecraft, but you have to read only the red lines in order to understand better, because through those lines the basic idea of the passage is given out. Naturally, it is a farce. See, women struggle to be virtuous when they are trying to be virtuous, whose virtues do not result from the exercise of its own reason. So they are not capable even giving her own reason. So why should they be called virtuous? This was Rousseau's opinion respecting men. Respecting men are the only being who have the reason. Naturally, female are not reasonable at all. So Rousseau tried to figure out that men are the only source of inspiration, source of reasoning, source of intellect. Now, Mary Wollstonecraft extended it to women, confidently assert that they have been drawn out of their sphere by false refinement. Why false refinement? Not by an endeavor to acquire masculine qualities. So because they are not here to acquire masculine qualities, this is the false refinement. So they are trying to get the better education, but they are not getting it, because male are the only source of reasoning, only source of intellect. So female cannot get the education because they cannot be reasonable, they cannot be intellectual. Still, the regal homage which they receive is so intoxicating that till the manners of the times have changed and formed on more reasonable principles. Okay, so the illegitimate power which they obtain by degrading themselves is a curse. So this is the illegitimate power which they obtain, they means the female, obtain by degrading themselves. They are degrading themselves is a curse. Because why it is a curse? Because they are even not understanding their worth. And that is why they are completely denying the power they wish to get. But for this epoch, we must wait perhaps the kings and nobles enlightened by reason. So see, this is the point where Mary Wollstonecraft tries to suggest enlightenment has its effect, that you can understand the passive irony that for this epoch means to get the intellectual benefit, to get the reasoning, the ability to be on the same platform. If women do not resign the arbitrary power of beauty. Why arbitrary power of beauty? Because women have the power of beauty, and this is arbitrary in nature, because sometimes this power even fail because they have no reasoning. They have only one aspect, only one idea, that is they are beautiful, they have the beauty. So they will prove that they have less mind than men, and because this is arbitrary, so they have less mind than men. Even from the perspective of men is a part of the male. It is not belonging to a female. How Rousseau and Dr. Gregory represented women. So Dr. Gregory, who is Dr. Gregory? I am coming to that point, but before that point, let me finish this one. All the writers who have written on the subject of female education and manners, from Rousseau to Dr. Gregory, have contributed to render women more artificial, weaker characters than they would otherwise have been, and consequently more useless members of the society. Naturally, you can understand that because they have already rendered women as more artificial, weaker characters than they would otherwise have been, and consequently more useless members of the society. Beggared as weaker characters, naturally they are useless members of the society. Now in paragraph 15 to 16, women struggle to gather knowledge. How women were struggling at that period of time to gather knowledge. Women receive only a disorderly kind of education. For the little knowledge, you see, if you can follow that there are dots, these dots here, so you can find these dots in several other pages. These dots suggest there were other lines too, because I probably think that those lines are not that important here to mention. That is why I omitted all those lines and only put those lines which are significant according to me, so that you can understand. That is why only put these lines after the dots. For the little knowledge which women's strong minds attain from various circumstances, it is acquired more by sheer observations on real life than from comparing what has been individually observed with results of experience generalized by speculation, led by their dependent situation and domestic employments more into society. What they learn is rather by snatches, and learning is only a secondary thing. They do not pursue any one branch with the persevering ardor necessary to give vigor to the faculties and clearness to the judgment. See here, whatever they have learned, observations on real life, because a female has to work out in a family, and because she has not a direct engagement with anything else, she only has to think about the other aspects in a society, and her sheer observations on real life in a family gives her what they learn, basic education. And those aspects which she learned or she has learned, they learn is rather by snatches, because from the moments she takes the lessons. And learning is a secondary thing for her, definitely, because there are a lot of other works in a household which basically male are not attributed to do. And that is why a female, because she is assigned to do such works, she has to complete first all those works, and on the secondary aspect she can learn, because she has to do a lot of works. Through the works on the real life existence, on the observations of the real life, she learns the basic ideas. In the education of women, the cultivation of the understanding is always subordinate to the acquirement of some corporeal accomplishment. So cultivation of the understanding is always subordinate to the acquirement of some corporeal accomplishment. Besides, in youth, their faculties are not brought forward by emulation. And having no serious scientific study, if they have natural sagacity, it is turned too soon on life and manners. They dwell on effects and modifications without tracing them back to causes. And complicated rules and adjust behavior are a weak substitute for simple principles. See, this is the fun. Even if a girl wants to study, remember Rebati, the other text that I have also discussed in one of the presentations. In Rebati 2, that the grandmother doesn't want Rebati to study. That what exactly happens, that their faculties are not brought forward by emulation. There was no such emulation in a society, in a family. And having no serious scientific study, there is no scientific study, no background of a scientific study. If they have natural sagacity, it is turned too soon on life and manners. Naturally, if they have the sagacity, they want to learn. It turns out to be learning on the life and manners, that you have to behave in that way. You have to understand the valuable aspects of a society, of a family, etc. So they only dwell on only those aspects which seem to be important for a life and manner of a family, life and manner in a society. They were completely castrated from understanding of scientific study. Even they have the sagacity or some interest on study at all. The similarity you can get from Revati, Fakir Mohan Senapati also tried to point out perhaps that idea, the female education. Women and military men in respect of education. See, I previously mentioned that in chapter 1, as Wollstonecraft mentioned other aspects of the society, other relevant portions of society. Here, in chapter 2, she or rather compares women and military men in respect of education. Military men, like women, sent into the world before their minds have been stored with knowledge or fortified by principles. The consequences are similar. Soldiers acquire a little superficial knowledge snatched from the muddy current of conversation, and from continually mixing with society they gain what is termed knowledge of the world. Soldiers as well as women practice the minor virtues with punctilious politeness. Where is the sexual difference? When the education has been the same, all the difference that I can discern arises from the superior advantage of liberty, which enables the former to see more of life. See, she points out here that both the life and life of a military person and the female or a woman in a society are almost same. The consequences are similar. Soldiers acquire a little superficial knowledge, snatched from the muddy current of conversation. Similar happened with the women. Practice the mirror virtues of punctilious politeness, whereas then sexual difference. So there is no sexual difference, because military have the upper hand, so they get the better knowledge, whereas women do not. Figuring out or presenting in a different situation, forwarding in a different aspect, in a different ambience, both military men and women have their own knowledge reflected. They have their knowledge and they have to cooperate with the situation. But in real cases, in reality, female do not get the chance to get something more, whereas military men definitely get, because they are stronger sexes in the society. They are male. They motivate the male to be much stronger. So they have the advantage of liberty, which enables the former means the military men, to see more of life. This is the difference. Now in paragraph 18 to 20, you will get women and military officers. So how they are also connected. It may be further observed that officers are also particularly attentive to their persons, fond of dancing, crowded rooms, adventures and ridicule. Like the fair sex means women, the business of their lives is gallantry. They were taught to please and they only live to please. Yet they do not lose their rank in the distinction of sexes, for they are still reckoned superior to women. See, this is the difference. These lines are very easier. It is not that you cannot understand. These lines are easier to understand, to comprehend. So naturally, they get the better chances. The officers are doing the same kind of activities, even after that, they are distinct. So in rank, in position, so they are still reckoned superior to women. The great misfortune is this, that they both acquire manners before morals, and knowledge of life before they have from reflection. The consequence is natural. Satisfied with common nature, they become a prey to prejudices, and taking all their opinions on credit, they blindly submit to authority. So they blindly submit to authority means both women and military submit to authority, but because they are military men, they have the upper hand in the society, and before they both acquire manners before morals, women do not get the chance. It's a better chance, at least a second chance. Women and irony of obedience. What is that? Riches and hereditary honors have made ciphers of women to give consequence to the numerical figure, and idleness has produced a mixture of gallantry and despotism in society, which leads the very men who are the slaves of their mistresses to tyrannize over their sisters, wives, and daughters. Say, how interesting is this? This is the only keeping them in rank and file, strengthening the female mind by enlarging it, and there will be an end to blind obedience. But as blind obedience is ever sought for by power, tyrants and sensualists are in the right when they endeavor to keep women in the dark, because the former only want slaves and the latter is plaything. So the obedience factor is very interesting. The person who has the riches and hereditary honors, this is very interesting. See, you may have heard that you belong to a good family, a cultured family. Oftentimes many wives have to go through this experience that yes, you belong to a good family, a rich heritage is here. So you cannot behave in that way. You have to learn the customs and regulations, rules of this family. So to see these riches and hereditary honors. So a family which is very rich, and that family has the hereditary honors. So, sorry. Now, women produced a mixture of gallantry and despotism in society, which leads the very men who are the slaves of their mistresses to tyrannize over the sisters, who do not have any voice over their wives. They can easily shout over their sisters, wives and daughters, because mistresses are secondary options, because they go to the mistresses only to enjoy them. But because they enjoy the other female, they always shout to the female living in a society, like wife, like sisters, like daughters, etc. This is only keeping them in rank and file. So see, this is the chauvinistic idea. This is the male ego, that I am a male. Strengthen the female mind by enlarging it, and there will be an end to blind obedience. See, the female mind, enlarging it, if you enlarge it, if you enlarge the female mind, there will be the end of blind obedience. This blind obedience, that means a female who is obedient blindly, that will end. But as blind obedience is ever sought for by power, tyrants and sensualists are in the right when they endeavor to keep women in the dark. They do not let the women of their family come to the light. Why? Because they want slaves, and the female, the women, act as a plaything. The next part in this paragraph, paragraph number 18 to 20, who is the most dangerous tyrants according to Wollstonecraft, is also justified. According to her, the sensualist indeed has been the most dangerous of tyrants, and women have been duped by their lovers, as princes by their ministers, whilst dreaming that they are reigned over them. So they have a general idea that the women are reigning over those men, but actually this is not happening according to Wollstonecraft. So the sensualist, they are just playing with the women. Even today, this happens throughout the world, throughout the society. So the most dangerous of tyrants is therefore the sensualist, because they tend to be submissive, but in reality they are actually not. On the paragraph number 21 to 22, there is Russos Emily and Wollstonecraft's ideas. I now principally allude to Rousseau for his character of Sophia. Book 5 of Emily is entitled Sophie or Woman and contains the germ of Rousseau's ideas about woman. Is undoubtedly a captivating one, though it appears to me grossly unnatural. The principles on which her education was built that I mean to attack. See here, Wollstonecraft's idea is about Rousseau's Emily, Sophie or woman, because there you can get the Rousseau's idea about woman. But according to Wollstonecraft, the text is not very captivating and grossly unnatural. She attacks certain parts of education that, according to Rousseau, what could be the girl's education, she attacks on that part. Rousseau stands on female education, much like the other ideas explored in Emily, crystallize existing feelings on the time. During the 18th century, women's education was traditionally focused on domestic skills, including sewing, housekeeping, and cooking, as they were encouraged to stay within their suitable spheres, which Rousseau advocates. So Rousseau's point of view is that women or female should learn sewing, housekeeping, and cooking, etc. Because 18th century was that kind of age when women are not even free to do their own activities. So she asks these questions to Rousseau or regarding Emile and the subject matter of Emile. Is this the man who, in his order of virtue, would vanish all the soft arts of peace and almost carry us back to Spartan discipline? Is this the man who delights to paint the useful struggles of passion, the triumphs of good dispositions, and the heroic flights which carry the glowing soul out of itself? How are these mighty sentiments lowered when the pettifoot and enticing airs of his little favorite? So Wollstonecraft is voicing against how Emile was the good woman Sophie was portrayed. It is not about Emile or Emily, rather Sophie. Sophie's characterization was not suitable as Rousseau portrayed in his famous text, and Wollstonecraft exactly points out that this man, Rousseau, who in the order of virtue vanish all the soft arts of peace and almost carry us back to Spartan discipline, where women are always subjugated, they should maintain discipline, and male are supposed to be the good fortune, male are supposed to be the kings who can rule over the world, and female are just the substitute version of male. So these are the questions posed by Wollstonecraft against Rousseau's Emile and the ideas related to it. When responding to Rousseau's argument in A Vindication of the Rights of Women, Wollstonecraft directly quotes Emily in chapter 4 of her piece. This you cannot get. This is a footnote which I received from the Norton Critical Edition, and this footnote says this, that in chapter 4 of her piece, educate women like men, says Rousseau in Emile, and the more they resemble our sex, the less power will they have over us. This is the very point I may aim at. I do not wish them to have power over men, but over themselves. So it is not about that the female should get the power over male. It is that they should power over the female. The female should have an entirely disciplined area. They should work out for them. They should activate themselves for the better works. This was the idea by Wollstonecraft as expressed in chapter 4 of this text, A Vindication of the Rights of Women. This is just a reference I mentioned here. Women are therefore to be considered either as moral beings or so weak that they must be entirely subjected to the superior faculties of men. That's what exactly I said earlier. On paragraph number 23 to 25, see, there is Wollstonecraft's voice against Rousseau's ideas again. Rousseau declares that woman should never for a moment feel herself independent, that she should be governed by fear or exercise natural cunning, and made a coquettish slave in order to render her more alluring object of desire, a sweeter companion to man whenever he chooses to relax himself. What nonsense, as this is the voice. So Rousseau's idea was that you can easily get from these lines. If you are facing little problems, you can read the red lines, then it will be more appearing, more clear. So what nonsense, if women are by nature inferior to men, Their virtues must be the same in quality, if not in degree, or virtue is a relative idea. Consequently, their conduct should be founded on the same principles and have the same aim. So this is a nonsense. Why this is a nonsense? Because women are by no means inferior to men. If that is so, women have their virtue and they must be in same in quality. So if not in degree, virtues not in degree, or because it is a relative idea, consequently their conduct should be founded on the same principles. Their conduct means both the conduct of a female and a male must be found on the same idea and have the same aim. So it is not natural that the women should never feel independent. It is also not natural that women should be made a coquettish slave in order to render a male alluring object of desire. So it should not be at all. Defending women, another heading that I have given of this passage. Connected with men as daughters, wives and mothers, their moral character may be estimated by their manner of fulfilling those simple duties. But the grand end of their exhaustion should be to unfold their own faculties. Their life yields not to the felicity which can satisfy an immoral soul. I do not mean to insinuate that to forget the affections and duties that lie before them. On the contrary, I would warmly recommend them, even while I assert that they afford most satisfaction when they are considered in their true subordinate light. That is also important, because while defending women, Wollstonecraft said this, that women should unfold their own faculties and acquire the dignity of conscious virtue. Most significantly, they afford most satisfaction when they are considered the true subordinate light. So women must not be dependent on anyone else, specifically not on male, because this is an idea where women should get their upper hand. If they are not liberated from within, if they are not creating anything for themselves, they will not be liberated at all. So this is how Wollstonecraft is defending the woman as a part. So in Genesis 2, from 21 to 23, there are certain lines, and what Wollstonecraft's idea related to that is also expressed in these lines. From Genesis 2, what it is said: so the Lord God caused the man to fall into a deep sleep, and while he was sleeping, he took one of the man's ribs and then closed up the place with flesh. Then the Lord God made a woman from the rib he had taken out of the man, and he brought her to the man. The man said, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. So she shall be called woman, for she was taken out of man." So very naturally, you can understand that there is a clear-cut reference that men create females. So female are peculiarly created by the ribs, the bones from a male. Now, why this is important? Because in paragraph 26 to 32, these ideas are expressed. Probably the prevailing opinion that woman was created for man have taken its rise from Moses' poetical story. So this is the Moses' poetical story, what I have just given you. Yet, as very few, it is presumed, who have bestowed any serious thought on the subject ever supposed that Eve was, literally speaking, one of Adam's ribs. So that was the idea, that Eve was created from male, and one of Adam's ribs is the representation of Eve. Or only be so far admitted as it proves that man found it convenient to exert his strength to subjugate his companion, and his intention to show that she ought to have her neck bent under the yoke, because she, as well as the brute creation, was created to do his pleasure. Men seem to be designed by providence and to attain greater degree of virtue. So female, as it is always said by Wollstonecraft, the same idea is repeated again and again in different paragraphs. Male are the supreme virtue, the grace of providence, the degree of virtue, and in every respect female are the subjugated format, the secondary version of male. So this is the idea. Even it is taken from the Moses' poetical story. So this reflection of women, the condition of women, even found in Bible's references. Pope's moral essays is also mentioned here. Say in the lines, "I shall be told that women would lose many of her peculiar graces." The opinion of a well-known poet might be quoted to refute my unqualified assertions. This well-known poet is Pope, Alexander Pope, has said that in the name of the whole male sex, yet never so sure of passions to create as when she touched the brink of all we had. The moral essays 55 to 56. I cannot discover why, unless they are mortal, females should always be degraded by being made subservient to love or lust. So, quoting the lines from 55 to 56, from Pope's moral essays, Wollstonecraft tried to suggest that even in these ideas, I have no idea, that means Wollstonecraft has no idea where the female should always be degraded by being made subservient to love or lust, as they are represented, female are represented through their beauty. They are symbolical figure of love and lust. And why? This is the question that was also asked by Wollstonecraft, taken material from Pope's moral essays. Female is rendered as pleasing. Youth is the season for love in both sexes, but in those days of thoughtless enjoyment, provision should be made for the more important years of life, when reflection takes place of sensation. But Rousseau and most of the male writers who have followed his steps have warmly inculcated the whole tendency of female education ought to be directed to one point, render them pleasing. So female education is also rendering female as pleasing, nothing else. So female's description is suggested as they are mostly pleasing, beautiful. They are judged by their beauty, not by intellect, nothing else. Rousseau and his followers, most of the writers have done this. So whole tendency of female education ought to be directed to one point, render them pleasing. So whenever you find something good quality literature, there you can find that women, female, are supposed to be so pleasing, so beautiful. Give you one reference, Shakespeare's sonnet number 130, where Shakespeare directly compares his beloved Mary Fitton, probably the Dark Lady, to the other female figures who were supposed to be beautiful, soft-spoken, light-footed, etc. So every positive qualities were attributed to those female, and here there is a chance where you can get a different version of Shakespeare's Dark Lady. So this is what perhaps Wollstonecraft is also trying to say. In paragraph number 33 to 35, love is described. Love is eventually destroyed. How? Marriage can eradicate the habitat of life. The woman who has only been taught to please will soon find that her charms are oblique sunbeams, that they cannot have much effect on her husband's heart. When they are seen every day, will she then have sufficient native energy to look into herself for comfort and cultivate her dormant faculties? Or is it more rational to expect that she will try to please other men? When the husband ceases to be a lover, and the time will inevitably come, her desire of pleasing will then grow languid, or become a spring of bitterness, and love, perhaps the most evanescent of all passions, gives place to jealousy or vanity. See how love is destroyed. First of all, it is the marriage. Marriage destroys the love, the habitude of life. We think about those women who are only taught to please, will soon find their husbands, the charms are not that good. They cannot have such effect on her husband's heart because time is passing. Now when they are seen every day, after pleasing her husband, what do you think? That a woman should have that energy for herself to do something positive? Definitely no. So there are certain qualities that the female cannot progress with. She cannot have all those ideas even after doing such kind of activities. Principled or prejudiced women, who are they, and about them what Wollstonecraft has said. I now speak of women who are restrained by principle or prejudice, that they are cruelly neglected by their husbands. How can the great art of pleasing be such necessary study? It is only useful to a mistress. The chaste wife and serious mother should only consider her power to please as the polish of her virtues, and the affection of her husband as one of the comforts that render her task less difficult and her life happier. But whether she be loved or neglected, her first wish should be to make herself respectable, and not rely for her happiness on being subject to infirmities with herself. The amiable Dr. Gregory fell into a similar error. Respect his heart, but entirely disapprove of his celebrated legacy to his daughters. Now, I'm coming to Dr. Gregory, as I've also proposed to come to Dr. Gregory earlier, but right now I really need to come. But before that, who are these principled or prejudiced women? Whether she be loved or neglected, her first wish should be to make herself respectable. That is important. That whether someone is loving you or not, it doesn't matter. Respect should come from within and should come from you for the first time. At the first hand, you must be respectable. So if you behave as principled or prejudiced woman because you have a vanity, you have your own glory within, the husbands do not like it. So this is the great art of pleasing. So it should not be a necessary study. And that is the question raised by Wollstonecraft here. Now, what about Dr. Gregory? A Father's Legacy to His Daughters is a book written by Dr. John Gregory, 1724 to 1773, Scottish physician, medical writer, and moralist. Dr. Gregory wrote A Father's Legacy to His Daughters after the death of his wife in 1761 to honor her memory and record her thoughts on female education. The text advises parents and women on religion, moral conduct, friendship, and interactions with men with a focus on marriage. He suggested that women refrain from exposing any learning that they might have, as this would damage their ability to attract a husband. See, why Dr. Gregory becomes a subject matter for Wollstonecraft? Nothing else but idea of giving moral teaching to the female, education, suggestion regarding friendship, interactions, moral conduct, religion, and most significantly, the focus on marriage. So that is the reason why Wollstonecraft brings back the idea of Dr. Gregory here. In paragraph 36 to 38, he comments about Dr. Gregory's, proposes her arguments together. He advises them to cultivate a fondness for dress. Who is this he? He is Dr. Gregory. Cultivate a fondness for dress, because a fondness for dress, he asserts, is natural to them. I am unable to comprehend what either he or Rousseau mean when they frequently use this indefinite term. If they told us that in a pre-existent state the soul was fond of dress and brought this inclination within to a new body, I should listen to them with a half smile. But he only meant to say that exercise for the faculties will produce this fondness. I deny it. It is not natural, but arises like false ambition in men from love of power. What is the point here? The point is that if Dr. Gregory will say in a pre-existent state where women even did not exist, in that format of soul was fond of dress and brought this inclination with a new body, it is okay. But what Wollstonecraft has said, that Dr. Gregory points out that cultivating a fondness for dress is very easy and natural process for the female. That is unacceptable by Wollstonecraft. If you only meant to say that the exercise of the faculties will produce this fondness, I deny it. This is the exercise of the faculties. Faculty means brain, the working of brain, that it is a natural choice of the female to the dress. It is not at all true. Dr. Gregory goes much further. He actually recommends dissimulation and advises an innocent girl to give the life to her feelings and not dance with spirit in the name of truth and common sense. Why should not one woman acknowledge that she can take more exercise than another? Or in other words, that she has a sound constitution? Why to dump innocent vivacity? It should darkly to be told that men will draw conclusions which she little thinks of. Let the libertine draw that inference he pleases, but I hope that no sensible mother will restrain the natural frankness of youth by instilling such indecent cautions. She again questions the very foundation of understanding of the female. Here she says that it is not natural, first of all, in the name of truth and common sense, that a woman should not acknowledge that she can take more exercise than another. Women have the power. Women indeed have the power to do certain activities, definitely. Now, in other words, that she has a sound constitution. Because a female has a sound constitution, her own mind and brain to think of, why to damp innocent vivacity? Is she darkly to be told that men will draw conclusions? Yes, perhaps so. Because female were not ready to do something because male have their dominations over them, and that is the reason why female have not the grasp over it, they have not tried even to do something, because they were severely told, very with pressure, they were told not to work out with the brain. Dr. Gregory's ideas in the text regarding the female education that previously I have just mentioned the name, Dr. Gregory's ideas are completely deniable by Wollstonecraft, and Wollstonecraft's ideas is related to that. That is the reason why she mentions here Dr. Gregory. To gain the affections of a virtuous man, is affection necessary? This is a question raised by Wollstonecraft. Nature has given a woman a weaker frame than man, but to ensure her husband's affections, must wife, who by the exercise of her mind and body, whilst she was discharging the duties of a daughter, wife and mother, has allowed her constitution to restrain its natural strength and her nerves a healthy tone. Is she, I say, to condescend to use art as faint sickly delicacy in order to secure her husband's affection? Weakness may excite tenderness and gratify the arrogant pride of man, but the lordly caresses of a protector will not gratify a noble mind that pants for and deserves to be respected. Fondness is a poor substitute for friendship. You can remember the text of Ibsen, A Doll's House, where Nora Helmer and Torvald Helmer, they are together, and see, supposedly Nora Helmer is very happy because her husband called her in different names like very etc. Now, gradually, when we are moving throughout the play, we understand that this is a hollow sham. So to gain the affections of a virtuous man, this affection is not necessary because fondness is a poor substitute for friendship. If you are fond of someone, you are not friendly. The sickly delicacy in order to secure her husband's affection. This is a sickly delicacy. There is no rule and regulation mentioned anywhere that a female, if she has to get the attention of her husband, if she has to get the affection of her husband, seriousness and showing of affection is very necessary. This is not right. Because as Wollstonecraft mentions at the end, that fondness is a poor substitute of friendship. So someone has to be friend first. Her husband has to be friend first. So with friendship, you can understand what is your vibe, or as a whole about the female substitution, about the female condition. Now in paragraph 39 to 43, so there is a position of women, but have women so little ambition as to be satisfied with such condition? Can they supinely dream life away in a lap of pleasure or in the languor of weariness, rather than assert their claim to pursue reasonable pleasures and render themselves conspicuous by practicing the virtues which dignify mankind? Besides, the woman who strengthens her body and exercises her mind will, by managing her family and practicing various virtues, become the friend and not the humble dependent of her husband, and is, if she deserves his regard. By possessing such substantial qualities, she will not find it necessary to conceal her affection, nor to pretend to an unnatural coldness of constitution to excite her husband's passions. In fact, if we revert to history, we shall find that the women who have distinguished themselves have neither been the most beautiful nor the most gentle of their sex. So the basic idea that is expressed here, that women who have distinguished themselves have neither been the most beautiful nor the most gentle of their sex. This is the truth that Wollstonecraft tries to suggest here. See, a woman's life is basically confined in the status symbol of her male. The dogmatic, the family status, all that matters to them. Naturally, the question that begins from here is that the languor of weariness, rather than assert their claim to pursue reasonable pleasures and render themselves conspicuous by practicing the virtues which dignify mankind. So they are practicing something, or they should rather practice something which dignify their status. The women who strengthens her body and exercise her mind will, by managing her family and practicing various virtues, become the friend and not the humble dependent of her husband. So in that way, there must have a dependent nature of a woman. And by that dependent nature, she can be the friend of her husband, not just a simple passive aspect of the family life. Someone who is always subdued by her husband. So it is not the humble dependent person, rather a friend. And if she deserves this regard by possessing such substantial qualities, she will not find it necessary to conceal her affection. Naturally, the affection will be automatic. If similar kind of love and respect, similar kind of love and respect will follow, automatically the female, the other part, will receive it better, and naturally the family will be better, the position of woman will be better, according to Mary Wollstonecraft. Dr. Gregory's treatise and its refutal. I now allude to that part of Dr. Gregory's treatise. So here again Dr. Gregory is mentioned, where he advises a wife never to let her husband know the extent of her sensibility or affection. Voluptuous precaution. And as ineffectual as absurd, love from its very nature must be transitory, the most holy band of society's friendship. It has been well said by a shrewd satirist that rare as true love is, true friendship is still rarer. So it is rather friendship that is the point of Wollstonecraft, that continuously she signifies the concept of friendship. It is the friendship, the bondage between husband and wife, man and woman, male and female, is that bondage which may be called friendship. It is not a simple bondage between husband and wife, the kind of relationship they should have. This is the kind of relationship they should have, that the friendly kind of relationship, so that they can enjoy their friendship, they can build a relationship which may be based on their faith and trust. Love, the common passion, is in some degree felt by the mass of mankind. This passion, naturally increased by suspense and difficulties, draws the mind out of its accustomed state and exhausts the affections, but the security of marriage allowing the favor of love to suicide. A healthy temperature is thought insipid only by those who have not sufficient intellect to substitute the calm tenderness of friendship, the confidence of respect instead of blind admiration, and the sensual emotions of fondness. So where there is no bondage called friendship can be built together, suspense and difficulties are there, the mind will not be in an accustomed state, affections will not be there, the love automatically subsides because the fear of security of marriage. So marriage here is a bond which is threatening, which poses a threat towards the relationship, towards the human being who are possessing this relationship. So Dr. Gregory's treatise is completely refuted by Mary Wollstonecraft. In paragraph 48 to 52, portrayal women again here. Why must the female mind be tainted by coquettish arts to gratify the sensualist? Yes, this is a very secure and sick question. With perfect propriety, according to this view of things, does Rousseau make this the mistress of his soul, a Losier, La Sainte Perruques, when life was facing before her? In Rousseau's La Nouvelle Heloise, again, there is a reference which you cannot get the reference in the text. This is from the footnote. As I have said, that this is taken from the Norton edition of A Vindication of the Rights of Women. The heroine Julie reveals a long-held passionate love for Saint Perruques, as she is dying, even though she has been a faithful wife to Wilma throughout the novel. But this is no proof of the immortality of the passion. See, the example from Rousseau's text again, La Nouvelle Heloise, Julie is portrayed in that way, that passionate love for Saint Perruques, she is dying. She has a faithful, she has been a faithful wife to Wilma. However, that love is there. So it is not to gratify the sensualist. Why should it be? This is the question posed by Wollstonecraft. And this is no proof of the immortality of the passion, according to her. Of the same complexion is Dr. Gregory's advice respecting delicacy of sentiment, which he advises a woman not to acquire if she has determined to marry. This determination, however, perfectly consistent with his former advice, he calls indelicate, and earnestly persuades his daughters to conceal it, though it may govern their conduct as if it were delicate to have the common appetites of human nature. Dr. Gregory does the same. So, continuously Mary Wollstonecraft, taking examples of Dr. Gregory and Rousseau, she points out again and again only those aspects which are necessary for her. According to Wollstonecraft, Rousseau and Gregory figured out something, the education of women, the behavior of women must be like this, as if they are completely dependent on male. This is not such for Wollstonecraft, because the independence, the very basic foundation of independence, which is typically identified by male, is completely denied and refuted by Wollstonecraft, because every heroine that Rousseau created or Dr. Gregory created in her daughters are not in compliance with the idea that Mary Wollstonecraft wants to give us through her text. This will govern their conduct, and Mary Wollstonecraft says that this should not be done. Something previously thought of, something that previously sketched out, and that may govern the genealogies of women, that may govern the guide, the whole bunch of women, and women must follow that. This should not be done. If all the faculties of women's mind woman's mind are only to be cultivated as they respect her dependence on man, and merely proud is satisfied with such a paltry crown, let her grovel contentedly. But if she is struggling for the prize of her high calling, let her cultivate her understanding without stopping to consider what character the husband may have whom she is destined to marry. Let her only determine. So it is completely her determination whether she is going to select it or not, whether if she is very subservient, she wants to be subdued by male, that is okay. But for those women, those female who want to respond to the high calling, who want to get something bigger, who have a better perspective in life, those women should not perform the duties of a husband. That means should not obey what the male-dominated society thinks that she should obey. Women who have fostered a romantic or natural delicacy of feeling waste their lives in imagining how happy they should have been with a husband who could love them with a fervid, increasing affection every day. But they might as well pine married or single. That a proper education, a well-stored mind, would enable a woman to support a single life with dignity, but that she should avoid cultivating her taste, is quitting her substance for a shadow. Think about this. If a woman wants to live alone and with high intellectualism and with proper freedom, who is here to stop her? Perhaps there is no one. And that is the reason that if someone is imagining that she is very happy with her husband, that a proper education or well-stored mind of a woman would enable that woman support a single life with dignity. So it instills within you the dignity. It instills also within you how to remain single intellectually with proper guidance by herself, not by someone else. This is the point here. This is the portrayal of woman, partially done by Mary Wollstonecraft. Now the position of women continues in para 55 to 58. How women are to exist in that state where there is to be neither marrying nor giving in marriage, we are not told. For enough moralists have agreed that the tenor of life seems to prove that man is prepared by various circumstances for a future state. They constantly concur in advising women only to provide for the present. Gentleness, docility, and the spaniel-like affection are, on this ground, consistently recommended as the cardinal virtues of the sex. And disregarding the arbitrary economy of nature, one writer has declared that it is masculine for a woman to be melancholy. She was created to be the toy of man, his rattle, and it must jingle in his ears whenever, dismissing reason, he chooses to be amused. What is the sole purpose of a woman then? Women are created to be the toy of a man. That is the sole existence of woman. A female must possess these ideas, these concepts within her. And because she is created only to amuse men, she has nothing else to do. This is the position of woman in 18th century. Do passive indolent women make the best wives? Do the women who, by the attainment of a few superficial accomplishments, have strengthened to prevailing prejudice, merely contribute to the happiness of their husbands? Do they display their charms merely to amuse them? And have women who have early imbibed notions of passive obedience sufficient character to manage a family or educate children? These are the questions Mary Wollstonecraft puts forward. Naturally, these questions have not general answers, but still, she wants to be answered them. The questions are not difficult to understand. If you can continue reading these questions, you can understand the meaning of the questions easily. Now, what about Newton and female frame, male spirit? How Newton is connected here, why Newton is mentioned in this paragraph, Wollstonecraft says, what does history disclose but marks of inferiority? And how few women have emancipated themselves from the galling yoke of sovereign man? So few that the exceptions remind me of an ingenious conjecture respecting Newton, that he was probably a being of superior order, accidentally caged in a human body. In the same style, I have been led to imagine that few extraordinary women who have rushed in eccentrical directions out of the orbit prescribed to their sex were male spirits confined by mistake in a female frame. Even Wollstonecraft is not out of this concept of male and female structure. Newton, as it is said, that Newton was here for in the time of Enlightenment. So this huge figure, the scientist, great scientist Newton, has to come on the way of Wollstonecraft's ideas. So Newton is here, and she thought Newton to be someone superior, someone accidentally caged in a human body, some superior being, some superior form. Now, According to Wollstonecraft, she has been led to imagine that few extraordinary women are there who have rushed in eccentrical directions out of the orbit prescribed to their sex, were male spirits confined by mistaken female frame. So there must be some women who have the notions of doing something like a male. They are extraordinary in the sense that they are possessing male spirits in the guise of a female or in the framework of a female. In paragraph 59 to 64, we are almost at the end of this text. That means chapter 2 of Vindication of the Rights of Women. So how should women be treated? In this paragraph, she tries to say, men have increased that inferiority till women are almost sunk below the standard of rational creatures. As we can understand that. This is throughout the text. This is throughout this chapter as it is described. Let their faculties have room to unfold and their virtues to gain strength, and then determine where the whole sex must stand in the intellectual scale. Yet, let it be remembered that for a small number of distinguished women, I do not ask a place, that like the brutes, they were principally created for the use of man. He will let them patiently bite and rule, and not mock them with empty praise, or should their rationality be proved, he will not impede their improvement merely to gratify his sensual appetites. So far it is described that those aspects those male usually do with women, those should be stopped. Those have already been argued, those have already been discussed throughout the lecture session in this video. So those must be stopped. Rationality be proved, women's rationality, they should not be thought as the sensual appetites. And male should not, with all the graces of rhetoric, advise them to submit implicitly their understandings to the guidance of man. He will not, when he treats of the education of women, assert that they ought never to have free use of reason, nor would he recommend cunning and dissimulation to beings who are acquiring, in like manner as himself, the virtues of humanity. So, female are also the virtues of humanity, and they should be treated like that. All those aspects that male throughout the ages have done with female women, they must ban all of them. So treating a female gently, treating a female with dignity will increase the dignity of male, and that or those are the point of views that Mary Wollstonecraft tries to suggest through this text. If they are really capable of acting like rational creatures, they means female as well as male, let them not be treated like slaves, or like the brutes who are dependent on the reason of man when they associate with him, but cultivate their minds, give them the salutary, sublime carb or principle, and let them attain conscious dignity by feeling themselves only dependent on God. Teach them in common with a man to submit to necessity instead of giving to render them more pleasing a sex to morals. See, I have not marked the whole passage in red color because all of the lines are significant and these lines are not very difficult to understand. Further, should experience prove that they cannot attain the same degree of strength of mind, perseverance and fortitude, let their virtues be the same in kind, though they may vainly struggle for the same degree, and the superiority of man will be equally clear. So when they will be in the same platform, when you means the male will let the female to do something on the same platform, then the superiority of male will be proved. Unless and until male are not superior, according to Wollstonecraft. In para 67 to 70, the last words so far, females have been insulted. They have been decked with artificial graces that enable them to exercise a short-lived tyranny. Love in their bosoms taking place of every nobler passion. Their sole ambition is to be fair, to raise emotion instead of inspiring respect. And this ignoble desire destroys all strength of character. See, if you have to build a character properly, then you should go through that. You must imbibe those qualities within you, that self-respect, culture, intelligence should be reflected by your attitude, by your activities, etc. So whatever women have done so far are not for their good, for their betterment, for the amelioration of the society, for the amelioration of themselves. So they have the love in their bosoms, but because they want to raise emotion better, because they want to dress or they want to wear pretty dresses in that inspiring aspects, this ignoble desire, all of them destroy their strength of character. Liberty is the mother of virtue, and women are, by their very constitution, slaves, and not allowed to breathe the sharp, invigorating air of freedom. They must ever languish like exotics and be reckoned beautiful flaws in nature. Let it also be remembered that they are the only flaw. By a twist, she wants to suggest that female should not be treated as the flaw. If you think that female as the flaw, then the society will be a flawed society, and male definitely will be flawed human being. Naturally, men have submitted to superior strength to enjoy with impunity the pleasure of the moment. Women have only done the same, and therefore it cannot be demonstrated that women is essentially inferior to man, because she has always been subjugated. Yes, when do you give the chance to a woman to prosper, to flourish? Because you have not done it. That is why this is the reason that you have never judged women properly. If you are terming women as something inferior to male, that means you are subjugating female from the very beginning of the source, from the very beginning of the emergence of women. This is the reason why women are still subjugated, why women are still thought to be subjugated. Brutal force has hitherto governed the world, and that the science of politics in its infancy is evident from philosophers' crippling. To keep that knowledge most useful to man that determines distinction. I shall not pursue this argument any further than to establish an obvious inference that as sound politics diffuse liberty, mankind, including women, will become more wise and virtuous. So she stops here in the chapter 2. On the chapter 3, she goes again about all these aspects again and again and again and again throughout the chapters. But at the end of the second chapter, we come to understand that the sole idea of Wollstonecraft is this, that she wants female to be free. Moreover, she has this idea that female was subjugated from the very beginning of the rise of women culture, rise of family culture. So if that subjugation will be over from then, female may have prospered better. Together with this is the end of the chapter 2, but this is not the end of the video, because I have done certain aspects, the critical essays, just as I have done on the other videos, on the other topics. In this topic too, I have given you certain topics, certain names of critical essays may have been used later for your direct analysis. Like Mary Wollstonecraft's Demands for the Education of Women by Emma Rauschenberg-Clough. On the Reception of Mary Wollstonecraft's Vindication of the Rights of Women by R.M. Jens. Mary Wollstonecraft's Vindication of the Rights of Women and Female Sexuality by Mary Povey. Reflections on Chapter 2 of Mary Wollstonecraft's Vindication of the Rights of Women. The last one is typically about this Chapter 2, where you can get more informations about this chapter. Now, because the video seems to be so lengthy, but what you can do through the video or by this video, that through the informations you can gather, you can collect separately, you can make topics that separate topics. For example, what Wollstonecraft commented on Milton, or why did she bring Milton into her argument, what she had spoken about Dr. Gregory and his treatise. So there are various paragraphs, as I mentioned. You can do similar aspects while writing your answer. If the questions are asked in several ways, you can mention the paragraph numbers, and this will strengthen your answer script. So this is almost the end of the analysis. Hope you have liked it. Till the further video comes, it's okay. Stay healthy, stay blessed. Thank you.